a pleasure to welcome you both to the Mod Lounge to talk about disruption today. And we're really pleased to have you here to talk about your work. Can you tell us a bit about how your interest in music came about?
I guess I've always been interested in music, I guess. I think I didn't really think that I could do it until I was a teenager. But yeah, it's always been there in my life, I think, and I've kind of just found my way in at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like, honestly, that resonates with me as well. It was something I've kind of always enjoyed, but like, yeah, I mean, I trained as a classical pianist. I came to it pretty late by classical piano standards. I was about 12 or 13. And yeah, for me, it started out really as a like way of connecting with myself and expressing myself. And it's turned into a career of sorts, which is delightful. But yeah, it didn't really come about from anything other than, like wanting a way of expressing myself.
Mm-hmm. Great. And so, yeah, how do you think that the disruption that COVID and the rising discussion around Black Lives Matter has been impacting both of your practices recently?
Oh, I can answer that so comprehensively for both of us. No, that's not true. Yeah, it sucked. It's been the worst. It's been emotionally, creatively, and physically exhausting in basically every respect. COVID less so, but especially the stuff in the last couple of weeks has just been, when you feel urgently like your energy needs to be spent signal boosting people, turning up to protests, trying to raise money, and also, like, frankly, when your attention is so drawn to this stuff in a way that is really energetically draining. It's really difficult to make art, and it's really difficult to justify making art that's not necessarily, like, I don't really make very direct work in many respects, and it feels difficult to not be directly doing something.
Yeah, I feel that too.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like knowing both of your practices, being a little bit familiar with both of your music practices, I guess. I have an understanding of how your work is political and how it does have that dimension, but yeah, perhaps the sense that you want to make that clearer or more, overtly political in a less abstract kind of way is a difficult thing at the moment, particularly to feel like it's justified. But yeah, that's really interesting.
Sione sent me a message yesterday that just read, "I just want to listen to Rage Against the Machine about this." And I was just like,
It's an interesting
what's fun about this project with Mod is, we're making work that's reflecting on this. And like, perhaps the most important reflection both of us have had is that actually, like, making work is pretty far down our list of priorities in this time. And it's been interesting. You're right, both of us make political work, but in some respects, but I think for both of us, some of the kind of, I don't know, I feel especially at the core of my work is a sense of self-care and community care. And gosh, that's been difficult.
Yep. So I guess following on from that, do either of you want to talk about what you think the most challenging aspect of your practices have been? And that could be either sort of more recently, or it could be more broadly what you think the main kind of challenge that you face as artists.
Yeah, it's hard to think about stuff that isn't what the challenges of the last couple of weeks have been.
Totally talk about
so
that.
True.
Yeah.
I feel
yes. I think seeing what's happening in like the US and kind of spreading across the world has been inspiring, definitely in some way, but not really in an artistic way, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
sense of, sorry, go Dan.
Oh no, I was gonna like 100% with Sione on that front, but yeah, I think it's, you know, like a lot of the kind of core, a lot of the problems at the core of kind of what's happening with BLM right now, to a lesser extent, affect all of us. You know, like we all, like capitalism is truly difficult, like for like from a making work perspective. You know, like I can, you know, I'm white, I'm a dude, like I have a relatively easy time, but it's, yeah, and it still sucks, you know. And I think that like part of our job as artists is to at least somewhat push through that and do something meaningful and something like actually positive for our communities regardless. But yeah, when there's all that extra stuff to push through, it's bloody hard.
And also I think another thing I keep thinking about is like you see like videos from the protests and stuff, and people are like dancing to music and stuff, and it's like, to me that's the kind of social power of music. It's not necessarily embedding like this literal message. It's like that power of like everyone's moving to the same beat kind of thing, and that kind of thing. At least with like that kind of music, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
It's 100%. That kind of music is an important distinction because of course, like experimental music is a bit more tricky. Like, you know, when you're talking about an art form that has, I guess, emerging priorities at its core, you know, like we're trying to push a little bit what we think music can do. It's difficult to feel the value of that when we're kind of back to the basics of fighting for people's human rights and the basics of music that we're seeing being most powerful and most valuable in this time is stuff that does speak more directly either to people's need to dance or to people's need to riot.
And finding a way to reflect or kind of anticipate how people might need to, what they might need from your work, or how your work might kind of add to the activism that's happening right now. Definitely.
With all the, I guess, the world state at the moment, what changes to the urban audio landscape have you seen? Maybe Dan, if you go first.
Two really marked ones actually. When we first were talking about this project, like I was living in Thorpe, which is right underneath a flight path and next to South Road, and the first thing I kind of noticed was that it was incredibly quiet in a way that I'd never been able to notice in that particular house. And then the last few weeks it's been incredibly loud, and it's been full of voices and full of people. And I think that it's extraordinary. I mean, 2020 is really a year of highs and lows, but and I think the same could be said about the sounds we hear outside. But I don't think that silence and loudness necessarily indicate different politics. I mean, I was at the rally on Saturday in Vic Square, and it was broadly silent for like almost all of the speeches, you know, and that's powerful too. Like, and there's been, you know, my friends in New York have reported like beautiful shared silences, beautiful shared moments of anger and rage and shouting as well. But it's I think what's changed about the urban soundscape is that we notice it. We're forced to notice it through absence or through excess.
Yeah, I don't think I can add anything to that.
Sorry.
Oh, no, it was, I totally feel that. Yeah, I guess I just haven't been out much. The only times I've been out is like to the shops and then to the protest the other day. So like, that's my urban experience of the last few months.
I guess going back to the, you know, if sometimes, you know, people are kind of afraid of the silence, especially in moments like this, but it's a really interesting way to think of it. You know, maybe if we're silent in anger, or we're, you know, silent because we're listening So we're not just filling the gap with words and, you know, maybe drowning out the voices that need to be heard. So yeah, it's a really interesting kind of way to look at it, because sometimes we see silence as complacency, but maybe it's better to be silent and listen and learn. Now, what can you tell us about your upcoming performance tomorrow? Maybe Sione, you want to go first on this one?
Well, as far as like the performance aspect, I'm not really sure how it's gonna come out, but but yeah, it's been a really interesting experience working on this while everything's been going on. It's felt almost kind of like we're like struggling through the same thing, kind of like in the way that we're corresponding with each other, and just like sharing things back and forth. And yeah, it's been really unlike any collaborative experience I've had, I think.
Yeah, no, I can say the same. Like, it's listening is a huge part of my practice, like as a field recorder, but also like, I don't know, as a composer as well. Like, I listen to so much music. It's an important, you know, part of how I kind of develop material. But I think, yeah, especially in the context of this project, it's been a lot of listening to how we both feel, and a lot of listening to and just being like bearing witness to each other's complete lack of motivation and complete lack of, you know, like, because that's real. And like, weirdly, like, yeah, this has been a process. We went, you know, like from the start of this project to where we are now, for me at least, this process has been actually making myself sit with how I feel and reflecting on that musically. And I think that that's, I don't know, I don't want to say it's therapeutic, because I think that that kind of undersells it in many respects. But I think in terms of what to expect from tomorrow, it's, I think a lot of us are kind of overloaded with information and hearing lots of stuff and seeing lots of stuff. I don't think we have the time or space to sit with it. And I think that, yeah, in terms of a performance tomorrow, that's kind of what we're trying to do, is just give some space to sit with all of this stuff we've been bombarded with, because that's what we've had to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's kind of thing you add to it, and how do you do that in a way that's meaningful for other people who are maybe overwhelmed and sitting in their own kind of noisy, silent bungalow at the same time. So yeah, and so kind of along that vein, what are you hoping people will take away from the work that you're doing?
Yeah. I feel like this is something we're both notoriously bad at answering anyway. Like, I have genuinely very few expectations on audiences. I'm happy when people turn up, and I hope that like the space we hold, whatever that might end up being for people, is enough for what they came for.
Yeah, I think, maybe this work is a bit different, but with my usual work, it's generally like, this is how I feel, and if you relate to it, then that like that's cool. But yeah, I think one of the biggest kind of demotivating obstacles while making this has been like trying to think about how the audience would feel, and kind of once I think we both got past that, it was like a lot easier to work on. Yeah.
So what's the key question we should be asking going forward? So what do you really want people to consider, you know, sit and consider with the work that you're doing?
I think one of the early things that we started kind of developing this concept from was just the idea of sitting with change and like acclimatizing to change, I think. And I think that still carries through in the way the composition progresses, especially in the things that Dan has done to kind of like bend these piano lines and things together. And I feel like that, like even just listening to it while like adding stuff, and like I feel that in the composition. So I hope that comes through for people.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think, when we first started this, something I think we both sat with a lot was the idea that whatever's coming next for us, we have to be prepared for it to sound, look, and feel totally different. Like, when we first started this, I think some of our initial conversations were like, well, COVID is basically a dry run for climate change in many respects, like in terms of like massive societal upheaval, like absolutely like disasters on like the human scale. Like COVID is really a dress rehearsal for that, and that's something that fills both of us with a great deal of dread. And like, so for us, it's kind of like we had a lot of conversations around how do we, if we both care about the people who listen to our music, how do we help people deal with change and deal with drastic change? And I'd say that like that has just been focused internally for us over the course of working on this, because it's had to be. And I think that the reality is what we first thought was something we could pass on to our audiences was something we needed ourselves. So yeah, it's kind of become a piece about the experience of that, which, and I hope that, I hope people are ready to drastically change.
And whether they'll have a choice.
Yeah.
It's a really big thing as well. It's the adaptation you were talking about, Sione. So I guess the next question probably would like to ask is, and given that we've been talking about like motivation and lack of motivation and how difficult it can be at the moment for people making creative work, what's coming next for both of you?
Me first? Let's do this.
Yeah, you can go first.
Or I suppose, what?
Oh, sorry, were you saying me first? I don't know.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Boom, am I right?
Yeah, I can go first. Cool. Just like what's next in my like overall practice.
In your practice, or what? Are there any? And any changes you're anticipating in how you're making, or anything that's come from this project that you think might lead into something further, or where your collaboration might go after this project?
Well, I've been kind of, since I released my last EP, I've been working on what I think will be an album, which will be my debut album.
Oh, great.
So yeah, I've just kind of been writing a lot of tracks for that, experimenting and trying to kind of figure out what the tracks are saying and what the kind of world is, because I really like to kind of build the world of a release. So I'm still in that process at the moment. It's just kind of starting to come together. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I think I feel like my plans after this is just like having a long cry. Possibly while listening to Charlie XCX. No, Decibel will be premiering A Piece of Mine online in a couple of weeks, which is like another like sad gay dissociative piano banger. I feel like I think these guys have the link to that, so they'll post it. Really cool kind of Melbourne new music ensemble. Yeah, just a little piece about inappropriate sounds I've made after midnight. Don't overthink it. Other than that, sorry guys. Other than that, I feel like just continuing to kind of work on stuff. I've taken a bit of time off of performing, and it's nice to kind of be back in that world. And if it's one thing that this kind of weird period has done, it's made me realize that I do actually still love doing this more than most things. So I feel like something will happen. It'll be nice. We'll see.
It will be. Yeah. They both sound fantastic. So yeah. Yeah, and I guess, what do you think, either through the work that you're doing or just in general, what in particular do you think you would like people to be thinking about over the next, I guess, moving forward through this disruptive period?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, my work broadly is about queer bodies and about making space for your own queer body, like basically by kind of reflecting on and offering up my own body is kind of, I suppose, like a medium for that. And yeah, I mean, generally it feels like bizarre and like vaguely bougie and theoretical to be like, oh, make space for your queer body, but like actually make space for yourself. Like I don't know, it's easy and also important to get swept up in what's happening, but it's also important that we're all alive to deal with it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like in terms of like my work, in terms of my, I guess, like personal philosophy, I guess that's what I want people to think about. But I also want people to, you know, donate to bail funds, donate to Sisters Inside, like follow Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander-led initiatives and organisations who are doing work on the ground to ensure the end of deaths in custodies and abolish the police. Like WAR, for example, WAR are fantastic, Warriors of the Aboriginal Resistance. Like just keep an ear out, but also take care of yourself. That's what I'd like people to take away.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I want this kind of revolutionary energy to like spread to Australia in like a really tangible way. And I kind of worry that Australia is like too backwards at the moment to like grasp onto that, or like too complacent. But yeah, it's an exciting time in that sense. And I think I find it really amazing how much like genuinely radical stuff like people are catching on to in this time. And I hope that continues. Like it's kind of ideas like defund and abolish the police and stuff are becoming like less like, what the hell are you talking about? And more like, oh, like that's actually like
like it's
there's
possible.
like theory, it's like there's theory and stuff
Yeah.
behind it. There's like people have been talking about this for decades, and it's like it's backed up with understandings and things like that. So yeah,
I guess all that work over and all that practice of activist practice and thinking and doing over such a long period of time has come to a point where so rapidly those ideas are becoming more clear to people. It's really powerful.
Yeah, I definitely hope I'm with you there, Sione. I'd like to see less apathy. You know, like that backwards kind of way of doing things, I think comes a lot from apathy as well. It's like, well, it doesn't affect me. Oh, that's in America, you know. And I think especially music is such a good way to open people's eyes and be like, well, actually, it's in your backyard, so you need to get on that.
Yeah, more difficult conversations, both in art and in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, if people are wanting to find out more, so where can we come and find you?
Definitely follow me on Twitter. It's a trash fire. Dan is not a DJ is my handle on Twitter and on Instagram. You can also find me on Facebook, Dan Thorpe, musician. I don't know. I'm the guy with a buzz cut still. It's a very old person. I should probably change that. The mullet, it deserves recognition. Other than that, check out Decibel New Music as well. For that piece I mentioned earlier. And, stay safe. Oh, also I'm on Spotify. What am I talking about? Spotify and Bandcamp. Find me. I believe in you. Dan Thorpe, you got this.
We'll throw the links in the chat as well if anyone wants to go and get linked directly to you.
Yeah, I'm like on all the things on the socials and Spotify and all that, as Lonelyspeck. Yeah. My Twitter is also arguably a trash fire, so join us both there. Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, thank you both so much for coming on today. It's been really great to have you and to have this.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
See you tomorrow.
Yes, see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Looking forward to it.